Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, Facebook just paid out their biggest bug bounty yet. We'll tell you about the flaw that was so critical, they paid a $33,000 bug bounty. Then it's Chrome's bad week for security, a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 146 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. This episode was streamed live on January 23rd, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy and Ting. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as this show goes on. Our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
You know, as many times as I've done that intro on the faux show this last week, I was asked to repeat it off the top of my head. I had to start at the very beginning to go through the entire thing to get the last bit. It's all automatic, Alan.
Yep.
So this is totally unrelated to this show, not even really in your wheelhouse, but it struck me right as we were starting. Are you still kind of considering coming down here for Linux Fest Northwest?
Yep.
Tinkering? Really? Okay. Okay. All right. I hope Ange is still watching.
When is that?
End of April.
Okay.
I'll look it up for you real quick. We were thinking, now this is all, I'm just going to give you a little hint,
right.
But we were thinking about kind of throwing maybe a little after party down at the new studios.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So it's April 26th and 27th. So I'm kind of just going to maybe start putting a bug in people's ears that if you were considering going, we should by then have the new studio open, and I think we'll have a little event down there. I don't know yet. I'm not going to get all committal yet, but I think if we start sniffing out some interest, people can expect that. So, yeah, definitely. I think I'll mark you as down, Alan. I'm going to put you in the book. So we'll make sure that there's a spot for you to sit. Well, I teased in my tweet this week that it's a bad week for Chrome users. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but there's this interesting bug that was found, and I guess it actually turns out to be like an OpenID issue, but it got like a ton of money from Facebook, right?
Right. Well, it's just kind of an interesting story of how, exploit research and bug bounties actually happen, and how, you can build on things, and how, persistence is worth it. And it's just, in general, a good story, especially for people that are interested in understanding how this stuff works, even if they're not interested in doing it themselves. Right? So Facebook has paid out its biggest bug bounty ever, $33,500, after a researcher got the keys to the kingdom, as it was.
Yeah.
Which is quite an interesting story. So Reginaldo Silva, who's a Brazilian security researcher, found a remote execution flaw in Facebook and was able to perform various functions, including copying the contents of files from Facebook servers so he could read them. And after so he got the etc password file, which gave him a list of what users exist on the web server.
And their
so
IDs,
he would know, what usernames to try to SSH in as and things like that. He could also make network connections in and out of the web servers directly. So, he could make a connection as if he was Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And he also could have changed the URL of the Google OpenID provider that Facebook uses, so that when someone tried to log in with their Gmail account, instead of sending the data to Gmail, it would go to his thing, and he could man in the middle it and maybe possibly compromise people's Gmail.
Right.
Or their Facebook or whatever. So the story goes back a little ways, actually. So originally back in September of 2012, which is, quite a while ago now, the researchers, he discovered a XML external entity bug in the way Drupal does OpenID. So basically by saying, hey, use this OpenID provider over here, and then having that provider return some malicious XML, you could cause it to do stuff on the server that you're trying to log into. Right? So you'd be like, go to Stack Exchange and be like, hey, I want to log in with my OpenID provider from over here. And that one, you could send some code to Stack Exchange when they called to validate that user, and have code run on the Stack Exchange server and do whatever you want. Right? Steal files, make connections, run code, whatever. So after he found it and fixed it, a little bit after, he's like, hey, I bet that's not specific just to Drupal. And so he found that, yes, it worked against Stack Exchange. So he reported it to them and they fixed it. So then he tried Google. And it kind of worked, but he wasn't able to read any files or make any network connections. Google had some kind of mitigation or something that was stopping him. But by using the billion laughs attack, he could have did a distributed denial of service attack against the App Engine or Blogger platforms.
Uh-huh.
So the billion laughs is an interesting attack with XML. In XML you can have entities like ampersand AMP, and it makes the ampersand character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you define an entity called lol, and its definition is actually just lol a bunch of times, and then you define lol2, and it's lol2 a bunch, and do it 10 times, then when you actually call it, it calls the first one, which calls the second one 10 times, and the second one's calling the third one 10 times, and all the way down to the 10th one 10 times. So it actually would expand a billion times. And so it would consume all of the memory on the XML parser and break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he could have done that and taken out Blogger and App Engine. Anyway, so then he tried Facebook, but he noticed that Facebook had stopped using OpenID for most things. And so he couldn't find the endpoint where he had to connect to use OpenID, right? He Googled and all he found was this old endpoint that was a 404 now. So he went on and did his stuff or whatever. And then sometime later, he was looking at the Facebook password reset system. And he discovered if you had a Gmail address, one of the options was to use OpenID with your Gmail to prove that was your Gmail. Mm-hmm. And then it would reset your password. Mm. So from that, he managed to get the endpoint for OpenID at Facebook. But he still wasn't able to launch his attack because the endpoint would only talk to Google. And so because he wasn't Google, he couldn't make Google inject the bad XML. So he played with it some more and started reading the spec for OpenID. And he found that by sending certain parameters to the endpoint, he could get it to use his provider instead. Mm. And from that, he was able to finally get it to hit his server and run his malicious XML code. And he has the example on his blog there, although most of it's redacted for obvious reasons. And from this, he was able to get a copy of etc password from the Facebook servers and go on. And so at that point, he thought about it a little bit, and he's like, well, the Facebook bug bounty program says as soon as you find something, you should report it. Although he was like, well, I kind of want to keep going a little bit and prove that you could use remote code execution with this, because that makes it a much more important bug and means that it'd be worth more money.
Sure.
But he figured, well, it's going to take him a while to get around to reading the bug report and fixing it anyway, right? So he sent it in and went and had dinner or something. I forget what it says he did. But within 2 hours, Facebook had already deployed an emergency patch for it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So then he was like, oh, well, now I can't test that other part. Yeah. So what he did is just wrote back and explained how he would have done it. And they tried it out, and they're like, yes, that would have worked. So we'll bump it up to a remote code execution and give you the bigger bounty.
So, and this is that was their record all-time bounty.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
A remote code execution bug like that reported to Google would only be worth $20,000.
Only.
Yeah.
And he got $33,000.
Yeah.
That's not a bad way to make some money. If you do that a couple times a year, you're living comfortable in the U.S.
Yeah. Although there's an interesting article over at Bloomberg where someone from Facebook is quoted saying, if there's $1 million bug, we will pay it out. And it's like, well, real code execution and this at Facebook could have been that bad.
Yeah, what does count as what?
Yeah, I think that was just a headline. I don't think they expect to pay anybody $1 million for anything.
That's when you can actually log into Mark Zuckerberg's account. That's when you get the $1 million.
Something.
Or Obama's account or something like that.
But yeah, so it's interesting. This one, we have the researcher's blog where he goes through the details of, how this all started more than a year ago. And then also we have Facebook security team's bug bounty blog where they talk about their side of it. And, it matches up exactly. And then also we have the link to the Bloomberg where Facebook talks about extending their bug bounty program when someone managed to compromise their internal network and get access to their email or messaging or something. And it's like, well, that technically isn't covered by our bug bounty program. And so rather than not paying the guy or just doing a one-off, they're like, well, let's change the bug bounty program to cover it.
So they're really kind of being good guy Facebook.
So if you break into the Facebook network and tell them about it, you get paid.
Yeah.
Because they would rather pay you than you steal from them or something, right?
Yeah.
Cause them endless headaches and millions of dollars instead of them paying you $20,000 for being
Not to mention saves them a ton of embarrassment.
Exactly.
PR.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Every time they pay out for this bug bounty, it makes them look good. Whereas each time they get compromised, it makes them look bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So there you go. Go make some money by hacking Facebook. Just kidding. Chris does not condone that, unless you're a good guy.
Well, if you follow the terms of the bug bounty program, then it's okay.
You're legit. You're in the clear.
Yep.
All right, Alan. Well, why don't I just take a quick second here and thank GoDaddy.com for sponsoring this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. And they've got a special deal for you right now if you use the promo code 30deal7. 30deal7. See, 7's a lucky number. And this actually works out for you. If you use the promo code 30deal7, not only will you save 30% on anything new in your shopping cart, but because the number 7's in there, it's good luck. So if you get a domain and you put number 7 in there, you're going to get tons of traffic, scientifically proven by years of podcasting. How do you like that? So go over to GoDaddy.com,
Sure.
Take advantage of the 30% off deal by using 30deal7. And by the way, while you're over there, there is the new GoDaddy Super Bowl ad, and it is funny. It is new. I'll just play a quick second of it. There you go. So for you audio listeners, imagine a bunch of very burly men running down the street, and then up comes Danica, and she looks just as burly as the rest of them. I don't know if she's that ripped. I don't think so. Last time I checked, she wasn't that ripped. But you can watch the whole thing over on the GoDaddy website. That's got to be CG. That's got to be CG. But use the promo code 30deal7 when you're checking out to get 30% off anything over at GoDaddy. Maybe some hosting. They have a brand new WordPress hosting system where they've integrated the hosting and the infrastructure and WordPress. That way they can give you blazing fast performance, up-to-date security patches, and a whole new level of WordPress experience. So go over to GoDaddy.com. Use the promo code 30deal7 when you check out. And a big thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Okay, Alan. Well, why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk about Target? It seems like this story has been going on for almost a month now in the TechSNAP program, and now it's kind of getting a little embarrassing. What's going on?
Not quite, but as we talked about a little bit last week, Symantec had posted on their threatexpert.com. They post when somebody sends them malware, they analyze it and post the results, and then we'd seen that had been taken down, and luckily, Brian Krebs grabbed a copy off Google Cache before it disappeared from there as well.
Good man.
Yeah. And that's up on his website still. But you could see stuff like apparently even the IP address of one of the point of sales terminals, which could allow someone to continue messing around. But it also gave quite a bit of detail about how the malware was constructed and so on. And apparently there's a concern that this was going to interfere with the ongoing investigation or tip off the attackers about how much the researchers know, maybe, and cause them to cover their tracks sooner rather than later and stuff.
Okay.
I don't know. But a bunch of different security companies have either been self-censoring or have been getting nasty threats from somebody and pulling down their analysis and information about the Target breach.
So they'll have a post up. They'll be talking about it. They've had a story they've ran, and then they're opting to take that story off their website based on maybe getting contacted, do you think, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're getting contacted or if it's just like, hey, that's might interfere with our ongoing investigation, or if it's like, hey, take that down or we'll be mad at you. But it seems that they're voluntarily taking it down.
Huh.
Yeah, so the one we talked about was Symantec's thing. Also, Eyesight Partners, which is a Dallas-based cybersecurity company that is working with the U.S. Secret Service on some stuff.
Yeah.
They published a series of questions and answers on their website related to the attack on point-of-sales devices at U.S. retailers. And as of today, that has been pulled down.
So some people are calling this censorship. It doesn't really, so you don't think it's so much that.
Self-censorship, it has a different meaning than censorship, right? It just means not saying everything you know because you want to be nice or whatever, right?
That's
Self-censorship is when you don't tell someone they look fat.
It'd
right?
be, and I guess
that's what the meaning of the word. It's different than, censorship is kind of gotten is a bad thing necessarily, but self-censorship just means thinking about what you say before you say it.
And they could maybe, after the investigation is completed, repost some of these things. See, what I go back to on this is always one of the best things that could happen is if people give as much details as they can, so that way other people can improve their security systems and prevent the same thing happening to them.
Part of this might have to do with the fact that as many as 6 other U.S. companies are believed to have been victims of this point-of-sales related attack.
Yeah.
And so far, only Target and Neiman Marcus have come forward, which is a bad thing, right? If your network was compromised and you compromised my personal information, you have to tell me immediately. That's the law in Canada.
I look at this too as also a bit of a culture clash. Like, I think there is probably a group of people in business that, or maybe in law enforcement, that think it's inappropriate to post details about these breaches.
Right. It's typical law enforcement procedure not to give out any details until the investigation is over. And part of that, has more to do with, not tainting jury pools and things like that. And I'm not sure that, in the computer world, full disclosure has kind of been a thing for a while. Yeah. Although we have responsible disclosure as well. So, as long as all the details come out in short order, then that's fine. I'm okay with holding it back while things are still evolving. And once it's safe to do so, giving out all the detail. I just don't agree with hiding the details, if that makes sense.
I see. So there's a quote here from a semantic spokesperson that says, "We took the initiative to remove it because we didn't want the information to compromise the." I see. So that's where you get in the ongoing investigation.
Yeah. So what Intel's McAfee site did was just redact the post and remove a bunch of the technical detail and replace it with angle brackets and, EPOS IP instead of the IP address, and just angle bracket username instead of the actual username.
Sure,
and things
that makes sense. Don't need that info anyways, really.
Right. And then Alex Holden, who's the founder of Hold Security and is also the guy that, along with Brian Krebs, brought us the Adobe breach information. Right? They found that server with all the stuff on it. He said it was the right move for Symantec to pull the report, as attackers might have been able to use this information to compromise other point-of-sales device vendors. So apparently, knowing all the details of the attack against Target could allow someone else to attack some other store.
Yeah, but it also would allow another sysadmin or network operations person to make this necessary fixes. And I almost, the thing I caution against...
at the same time, it would force the other stores to hurry up and secure their systems.
And
that's the argument for full disclosure.
I would caution against having your Hold Security and your Krebs, not that they would, but having people like them who know all the details. So the only way to really protect yourself if you have a massive point-of-sale system deployment is to hire them and pay them because the information isn't freely available.
Right.
That's not good.
So holding it back for a certain amount of time that's reasonable to give people time to patch their stuff and so on. Because I think US CERT has been putting out information about the people that use these point-of-sale systems on how to secure them. But, a certain window of time to allow people to secure their systems is fine. But after that, the details need to be made public.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Holden says, "I was surprised that this information was posted on the internet in the first place. Besides having a target machine's name and its IP address, system structure, and drive mappings, it disclosed a very vital set of credentials set up specifically for exploitation of the device." So it gave the username and password, if you remember, the username and password used that were part of the malware that allowed you to connect the machine and exfiltrate the data.
Yeah, that's too much.
I don't know, because it's part of the malware. It's not like we were giving out the administrator password for the target network, right? It was just the credentials used by the malware, which oftentimes gives you insight into the malware author, right? If they're going to pick their password based on, some indication of who they are or what they're like or whatever, right?
Okay.
So it's, unless there are other vendors that are still compromised by this malware, where I could then go and exfiltrate card data, I don't see that password is very useful, right? Like knowing the password that was used for the malware.
Yeah,
if the malware is removed, then it doesn't matter.
That's a good theory, is maybe there are active infections still out there.
Possibly. It'll be interesting to find out what the 6 other U.S. companies that are already compromised are.
Yeah, I would like to know because, I mean, hopefully, Target must have been the largest, or else we'd probably know by now, right? I hope, because, boy, if it's another major... this is an interesting problem, as all of these companies kind of have this huge presence. You get hacked one spot anywhere in the country, and everybody's stuff gets exposed. Could just be, if it was a Walmart or a Fred Meyer's or any grocery store chain. I mean, a lot of more people could be affected. Yeah, okay. Well, interesting. Other thoughts on that one, Alan?
Not especially.
Okay, all right. We have links to that in the show notes if you guys want to check that out. I'll take a minute here and thank Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense. Ting is my mobile service provider. I got the Nexus 5 with wireless charging.
Got one?
Wireless charging, Alan. I sit down at my desk with zero effort. I sit down, boom, set it down, and it just starts charging. And then I pick it up. It's so nice. It's so awesome. The camera's great, too. Ting has tons of great devices, HTC One, Windows phones even, and feature phones. So what I want you to do is go to TechSNAP.ting.com. That's where you're going to get started. They have no contracts and no early termination fees, so you don't have to worry about it. And by the way, you only pay for what you use. They take your messages, your megabytes, and your minutes. They add those up at the end of the month. Whatever bucket you fall into, that's what you pay. Every Ting phone is a shared pool of minutes. So if you have one phone or you have a dozen phones, it can all pull from a pooled set of minutes, and it's only pay for what you use. We have folks in our chat room. Yes, they have Windows Phone, Rawzone. It's true. We have folks in our chat room who've switched their entire family over to Ting and are saving a ton of money. And as somebody who likes to be an informed consumer, one of the things I really like about Ting is how transparent they are. They come out and they just say things as they are, and they have a very active blog. And they also have a pretty good production team over on the Ting blog. In fact, here's a quick blog with one of their Canadians. Check this out.
My name is Tara, and I do quality assurance at 2 Cows. So the typical day for me would be to come in, and basically I go over all the emails between the agents and the customers within the last 48 hours. So I make sure that all of the emails are correct, they have all of the correct information, everything is classified properly, and then at the end of the week, I have a meeting with product management just to discuss all the top issues and see what we can do to alleviate the calls. The most memorable thing I'd have to say is when I helped a 94-year-old man activate his S3, and just listening to him play with S3 for the first time and his reaction to some of the things that were happening was really, really funny. When certain things would pop up, he'd be like, oh, he was really surprised by how quickly the phone was doing things and what he could actually do on the device. We went on Facebook together and stuff like that. It was really funny, and he messaged his grandkids, and he was really happy afterwards, so it was good. I would describe the company culture as, just laid back, relaxed. Everybody treats you like adults here, which is really refreshing from other workplaces, especially call centers. Nobody's really standing over your shoulder watching you do your work. They give you, your task, and then you take your time and do it yourself. And also, everybody is super helpful. If you have any issues, you can go up and ask somebody for help, or just throw it in the open chat, and somebody will definitely be there to help you.
It's pretty cool. And by the way, every Ting plan includes hotspot tethering, voicemail, picture ID, and Ting even has an early termination relief program. If you want to get out of your existing contract, you can find more over at ting.com/ETF, which is awesome. Yes. Go get started. Go to techsnap.ting.com and find out why I've been a happy Ting customer for over a year now. Techsnap.ting.com, and a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. I'll have to confer later with you, Alan, but I'll tell you what, definitely the Nexus 5, definitely.
Nice.
Okay, shifting gears, it's time to talk about Chrome, and it's funny, as we're going to talk about Chrome, full disclosure, I'm using Chrome right here, right now. And I have a buttload of extensions. I have so many extensions, it is ridiculous. People have commented on it. So
I only have a couple extensions in my Firefox.
I've got this awesome extension that converts any HTML selection into Markdown. So if I go on a web page and there's a bunch of links or something, I copy it all and it interprets it all as Markdown and I paste it into the show doc. It's like freaking magic, Alan. But
that sounds lazy.
Yeah, well, okay. All right. Okay.
I don't know. I write all my Markdown by hand.
You got me there. Okay, but
that's the whole point of Markdown, is that you're not
super easy
needing
to write.
Some computer program to do it for you to make it easy enough.
Okay. Oh man, crap! You're totally right. That was literally the reason why Markdown was created. Damn it. All right, Alan. So let's talk about what's going on with these Chrome extensions and how adware is getting slipped in there.
Yep. So as we've talked about, Chrome is updated automatically by Google, and that update process also includes Chrome's extensions, which are updated by the extension owners, right? The extension owner will upload a new extension, and it'll get included in the next update. So that means it's up to the user to decide if the owner of an extension is trustworthy or not, right? That's why when you install an extension, there's that dialogue, and it's like, are you sure you want to install this? Since you're basically giving them permission to push new code out to your browser whenever they feel like it. The issue is that ownership of a Chrome extension can be transferred from one party to another, and users are never informed that there's been an ownership change. So if you trust Guy X that writes this extension, and all of a sudden Guy X sells it to company Y, you're not reprompted to be like, hey,
right,
this is now somebody else. Do you trust this new person?
Right.
So malware and adware vendors have caught wind of this and have started showing up at the doors of extension authors and looking to buy their extensions. So, a lot of these extension authors, they created it to scratch an itch, and, it was years ago, and now they're probably not that interested in continuing the extension. And, they get lots of email about, oh, it doesn't work when I do this and that.
It
and
becomes a pain in the
I
butt.
just don't want to deal with it.
I made this over the weekend. It's not my problem.
Yeah. And then somebody shows up and be like, well, we'll pay you like $10,000 for your extension. Like, sure.
Are you kidding?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Win-win.
No questions need to be asked on that one.
Once the deal is done and the ownership of the extension is transferred, the new owners can issue an ad-filled update over Chrome's update service, which sends out the adware to every user of that extension.
Yeah. So they get a hold of it, and then they just silently push out an update. Yeah.
So a first-hand account of this, which was first spotted by OMG Chrome, was given Amit Agwanwar, the developer of the Add to Feedly extension. So it'd give you could right-click on something and add it to Feedly.
Yeah.
One morning, the extension author got an email offering thousands of dollars to buy his Chrome extension. And the extension was only about an hour's worth of work. So he's like, sure.
Yeah.
I only spent an hour writing it. I can write you one for every other bookmarking service, too, if you're going to pay me thousands of dollars each.
No kidding.
So he transferred the ownership of the extension to another Google account. A month later, the new extension owners released their first and so far only update, which injected adware into all pages and started redirecting certain links. And he said, this isn't a one-time event either. About a month ago, I had a very simple Chrome extension called Tweet This Page suddenly transform into an ad-injecting machine and start hijacking Google searches. Google has stated that Chrome's extension policy is due to change in June of 2014. The new policy will require extensions to serve a single purpose. So if the functionality of an extension changes, it'll trigger this system, which would stop this from happening even if the author didn't change, right? Because the malware authors could just write a simple extension people like and then change it themselves without changing hands. I think in addition, they should definitely make you reauthorize if the owner of the extension changes.
That seems like that's the fix right there. It's like if you just make a system in place where if the extension comes from a different Google account, then it's reflagged for auditing, and it would solve this big problem.
That would help, although there are other policy changes required too. Otherwise, the malware vendors could just write useful, simple extensions and then change them after to be the malware.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Do you remember
Probably wouldn't be quite as popular, but...
Do you remember that website, Listen to Bitcoin? Did you ever see that?
Yes. We talked about it when it turned into something bad.
Yeah, exactly, right? So all that happened there was somebody bought the website, they bought the domain, and then they pointed it to malware. The same thing could happen with a website. I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't... Maybe... It seems like if Chrome auto updates, doesn't check when the author changes, this might have been happening for a while, and we just really haven't heard a lot about it.
Yeah, because it happened to an extension you didn't have.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me kind of rethink the number of extensions I have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas I think almost all the extensions I have are complete like open source projects. They're not just one person extensions. Peregrine
Falcon points out in the chat room, though, it might not help. You'd have to have some sort of actual check, because if you just prompt the users, hey, by the way, this owner has changed, they're just going to click OK.
Then only people like us are going to care.
Yeah. So it's really got to be like Google's almost checking at a code level what it's doing.
Right, and you know how many extensions there are? That'd be really difficult to do.
Yeah, that is not necessarily an easy problem to solve.
Yep.
Now Google did state that they plan to change their Chrome extension policy.
Right, but the policy was just about if what extension does changes.
Solves
the problem too, but
keeping it simple.
It depends. How are they deciding when the fundamental purpose of an extension changes? Or rather, their policy is that extensions can only serve a single purpose. So they can't be your Feedly plugin and an adware plugin. Right? It means that each extension can only do one thing, which I suppose makes sense, but it's just that
it could be one thing that's bad.
All this is really going to do is mean that they will flag these malware ones and have them removed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help for the week between when the update goes out and when Google removes it. Right?
I kind of agree with Crash Benedict in the chat room, where this, in a way, kind of seems like a really big deal. Because now that, first of all, now that there's going to be no immediate change, this practice is just going to continue. And, how long is it going to be until extensions have price sheets and you go, well, I'll just go buy this extension here for $10,000 and distribute my malware that way. And Chrome's on Android, Chrome's on Chromebooks, Chrome's on Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's like the
perfect. You have extensions on the one on your phone?
Not yet. And in fact, we have in the roundup, we have another Chrome vulnerability story about another exploit in Chrome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting to the point now where the memory usage is just phenomenally high. Every extension...
Well, it happens to every browser as it gets older.
Right. But Chrome is particularly vulnerable because
more things onto it.
Every extension, I think, has its own thread. And they all take up a ton of memory. In fact, I have... So if I bring up... And then, of course, every tab...
That keeps them more separated,
I know.
It's a trade-off.
I know. So, here we go. I'm on...
You can just police yourself and not have so many extensions.
So here So here I am on the studio iMac out here, and I got Chrome going with a few tabs open for this here show. And in the video version, I couldn't even count how many Chrome threads I have running right now, and they take anywhere from 50 megabytes of memory to 400 megabytes of memory. It's kind of redonkulous. So the only thing I was going to just suggest is that we saw Firefox go through a period here's one that's taking 123 megabytes of memory. We saw Firefox go through a period where they had to refocus on performance and memory usage and things like that. Maybe it's time Chrome goes through that. Because they got to redo this extension thing. This is just unbelievable.
Yep.
All right, Al, any other thoughts on that?
Well, looking at my Firefox, that's been running for a long time.
Yeah.
2 weeks, 6 days, 4 hours. And has 138 tabs open. Is using 442 megabytes of memory, which is entirely reasonable for that number of tabs, each containing a graph that refreshes every 5 minutes. That's a lot of tabs now, isn't it?
That is.
Although, the browser I do most of my browsing in is a separate Firefox profile. With all the Flash and stuff, that tends to build up a little quicker, but...
I've been slowly moving over on my other computers over to Firefox, and I think it's just good to have for a healthy web. I think it's good to have good, solid competition, and I like the Mozilla Foundation, and I like their motivations for creating a web browser. And so as time goes on, I think I'll just be transitioning. There's a few extensions in Chrome I just love, but I'll make do. Alan, before we jump into the feedback, I wanted to mention something kind of fun we have going on right now, and I'll put a link to it in the chat room too for folks that are watching live. We are doing the Faux Show Awards. It's coming back big, and we've had swag recently that, like the Jupiter Broadcasting hoodie. But not everybody was able to get their hands on it, so we're going to give away some free stickers as part of a Faux Show Awards. We'll have a link in the show notes. You give us your IRC NIC and put your mailing address in there. You can also put your email address in there too, if you'd like. And then we will send you have to choose between white and black, either a black Jupiter Broadcasting sticker or a white Jupiter Broadcasting sticker. Now, here is the catch. We want a picture of where you put it, so that way we can add it to the Faux Show Awards, and we'll also be putting it on the Jupiter Broadcasting Instagram feed. So go choose the one you want, and give us your mailing address wherever you want it mailed to, and submit that, and then we'll feature those in an upcoming faux show, and you get a free sticker. Boom! We got the new logo. It's time to send it out to the folks.
I got the white one. I think I might finally put a sticker on my Mac, my Lenovo.
You totally should. And then snap it with your phone and send it to Angela, and she'll put it in the Faux show. So there you go. We'll have a link to that. It's got a crazy long address, but if you want to write it down, you can go to bit.ly/1D capital NHCU7. Yeah, bit.ly 1D.
Oh, and they're making a nice little world map of where the users are from.
Well, Angela did that.
Yep.
Yeah. She's fancy. She's excited. She's been mailing them out already. She went out and mailed out a whole batch this week of stickers. So, hey, cool. Who doesn't like free stickers? Especially with that cool new logo we got. I mean, that's a...
Yes, your new logo is awesome.
I know. Thank you.
Oh, the Mumble server. The blue version of it?
Yeah, they put it on there.
Nice.
I know. They put it on the Mumble server. It's great. So link to that in the show notes if you guys want to get yourself a free sticker and be part of the Faux Show Awards. But Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, like our first submitter, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first question is really all about you. He wants to kind of get in your head. He says, "Hi, Alan and Chris. Over the episodes, I've heard Alan mention that at home he has multiple VLANs and different SSIDs for his Wi-Fi. What is the purpose of segmenting a home network? Also, which gear is being used?" He wants to know about my core components of the LAN. So, Alan, what would you like to share about your home LAN setup?
I don't know.
Start with the VLANs.
So I have a bunch of separate VLANs so that I can separate the network. And basically, it means the computers in the one VLAN can't see the computers in the other VLAN. So they're in different IP subnets, and you have to go through the router to get between them so I can use my firewall to block what's allowed and what's not. In general, the computers on VLAN A, which is my home network, which is, the upstairs of my house, it has its own Wi-Fi network that actually has a hidden SSID. So you have to know what the SSID is plus know the password. It's not, so when you pop up that list of Wi-Fi networks, it's not on that list, the one for my home network. And that's the only network that has access to my personal ZFS server. And my ZFS server is the only thing the home network upstairs in my house has access to that's actually in my basement. Everything else in my basement is separate. And so that way, if some other computer here had a problem or something, or someone broke into it or something, they wouldn't have access to any of this work stuff in the basement. The wireless network, VLAN B is the office network downstairs, which is a couple of like PCBSD workstations, and it has its own Wi-Fi, and it does all my work stuff.
Sounds tidy, Alan.
Yeah. Then VLAN C is a management network. That's where the management interfaces for the switches, the IPMI for all the servers in the rack, the PDU for turning servers on and off, all that stuff is. That's a completely isolated network, since those things tend to be, they're almost SCADA systems, right? They're the kind of thing that really only certain people should have access to. So the firewall guards that very particularly, right? You can access that from my computer on the home LAN, but no other computer on the home LAN, and from the work network, or to do it from the internet, you have to come into a VPN and get into that management LAN. VLAN D is the guest Wi-Fi. So I have a separate Wi-Fi SSID that runs, published. Everybody can see it. You can connect. It has a shortish password that's easy to just tell someone when they come over. So, when I have friends over or whatever and they want to get their phone on the Wi-Fi, it's easy. And it's a password I can give them. But their phone or laptop that they bring on the Wi-Fi can't see the other computers at my house or my work network. They can have the internet, but that's it. And then VLAN E is actually a DMZ for the servers. It's not actually used yet because the servers aren't on the internet yet because they're waiting for my fiber connection. The surveyors for that were here last Friday, and it looks good so far. The the fiber near my house is, I live across the road from a high school, and the fiber for the high school is actually at the front of the school. So it's the street that intersects with mine. So they're just going to have to bring it down that street a little bit and then down my street and then up the side of my driveway.
Sweet. So when is that going to happen? Do they give you a timeline?
They're going to give me a timeline in a couple of weeks.
Sounds like a telco.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, so they have to finish the drawings and decide how they're going to do it and make sure there's enough clearance everywhere so that it's not getting in the way of something, and get all the permits and all that stuff. But they'll be able to give me a date when they expect to have it all finished, which I'm hoping isn't too long. My personal ZFS server has 5 network cards in it, or 5 network interfaces anyway, a 4-port card and a 1-port card. Excuse me. And so one of those is in VLAN A, so that I can access the files on my personal ZFS server, where I keep the edited episodes of BSD Now and things like that, or the unedited episodes. And then interface B allows it. There's a separate setup where my office stores stuff on there as well. Because until recently, I only had one ZFS server at home. Now I have 2, but the second one's for scale engine stuff. More production stuff, not the office stuff, so it's still separate. Anyway, and like I said, the DMZ is not used yet. As far as gear, the main component is a Netgear GS724T switch, which is a 24-port managed switch that allows me to set up VLANs and lags and stuff like that.
Nice.
It's only costs about $200 now. It was a bit more when I bought it originally, but I had to replace it when it got hit by lightning. So the price now is only $200, and it gives you 24 gigabit ports. Great speed, and you have VLANs and lags and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, 170 on Amazon right now.
Yeah. Wow. Now there's the GS724T, which is layer 2 and can do fancier things like automatic VLANs based on IP subnets, and it can do the routing between VLANs. If you want to allow traffic between certain VLANs, you don't have to have a machine that can route gigabits and so on. But that was overkill for my house. Like that's the kind of stuff we use at our racks at Scale Engine, but not what we would use at my house. And then for wireless, I have these little things I bought in Japan that cost like $15.
I kind of have like my wireless is kind of in transition. I have right now 2 wireless access points, kind of like you do, one for the guests and one for myself. But what I ended up doing is I took that guest wireless and I moved it back onto my LAN because I found I wanted to separate my G and N devices, and so I made the guest wireless G and the home wireless N, but I needed them both on the same LAN, so I kind of like rolled that back a little.
G devices, right?
Yeah, exactly. But so what I've done is everything is one flat network on the internal LAN. The switch itself is I am so lucky. It's a very awesome, very high-end HP managed switch with way more capacity than I'll ever need. And that is sort of the core of the network. I do have a pfSense firewall with a DMZ, which is where hanging off that right now, the only thing I have hanging off of it is a BitTorrent sync machine. But I was planning to put some other stuff in there, but now that the new studio move's coming up, I might move some of that to the studio. So mine's pretty simple. I haven't gone like with a lot of VLANs and things like that because
I only did recently, and partly just to play with it.
Yeah, I could see that. That'd be a good reason just for the experience. That'd be a good reason to do it. Or really, I mean, for tidiness. There is a tidiness aspect to it as well. But yeah, and if you guys want to kind of toss in what your network config is, we have a few folks that are talking about that. You can find this thread in the TechSNAP subreddit and toss in your configuration. Okay, Alan, this next one came from Sean, and he's going way back in the TechSNAP archive, back to episode 1. He says, back in episode 1, you talked about a security issue with Dropbox that's inherent in the way they dedupe their user data on the disk. Everything is encrypted with a single master key, and that's clearly a bad idea from a security standpoint, but I ask this. Wouldn't it be secure to first encrypt the data and then deduplicate the blocks as they're written to permanent storage? Block-level dedupe seems to make more sense than file-level anyhow, because blocks are fixed length with a finite number of potential hash values. Variable file lengths means you'll have many more potential hash values to index. Why would you use file-level deduplication? With regards to security, it seems like the file system doesn't care about the contents of the block, encrypted or not. It's all ones and zeros anyways. Please explain.
So a couple things. The problem with doing block-level dedupe after you encrypt it is that the encryption randomizes it. So two people uploading the same file, encrypted to different keys means that the file won't be the same anymore.
Right.
And so you would probably have a dedupe ratio of 0.
Yeah.
You would never dedupe anything because the encryption is supposed to make it random. So that's partly why you don't do it that way. So it depends. For example, we had a great interview with Colin Percival on BSD Now yesterday, and he runs a service called TarSNAP that does something like this. The way his system works is it's not using fixed length blocks for its change detection. Right? He has, because he's a mathematician, he wrote his own algorithm that finds the smallest possible changes. So it looks at the file, instead of breaking the files down in 4-byte blocks or something to find the changes. He did a great talk on how it works at EuroBSDCon. I'll add a link to the slides. But it finds the changes in the best way possible rather than using a fixed size block.
Huh. I can look for it while you explain it.
Yep. But yeah, so the way Collins does it is it does the dedupe, then it encrypts it and sends it. So it just uses the dedupe to decide not to send it instead. And if I recall correctly, with Collins' system, it only dedupes per user, not across everybody. Now, for something like Dropbox that's not meant to be as, security paranoid as TarSNAP, they could probably do it dedupe and then encrypt after. But the problem there is if you dedupe, you're not storing a separate copy for each user, and so it's not going to be encrypted separately.
Yeah.
And then you're going to still be able to tell what users have stuff that's the same. And the problem with doing block level dedupe instead of file level is that very big files are a lot of separate blocks, right? And you get the problem with ZFS is the dedupe takes a lot of memory because it has to remember every possible different block and where it is so it can look it up. With file level dedupe, it means that large files are one object instead of, if it's a 1 gig file and you're using a 8 kilobyte block, that's a lot of blocks. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you. So to answer your question, it's actually because of the encryption. It really is the way to say it. It's because of the encryption and the fact that encryption adds randomization.
But also for performance reasons, block level dedupe probably not as helpful. And yeah, because Dropbox wasn't meant to be secure.
Well, and you
shouldn't put anything that needs security in it.
Well, okay, yeah, that's true. But there's there's more intelligence they can probably do too if they have a system in place to do some sort of deduplication and things like that. All right. David wrote in, following up on last week's TechSNAP. In the episode titled "Target Exposed," you had a question about centralized authentication for Linux. Red Hat has developed a product called Red Hat Enterprise Identity Manager, and the free version is called Free IPA. That's a nice name. Which solves the same problem for Linux that Active Directory does for Windows. The solution is able to form a trust relationship with AD, so you can have a one-way SSO from Windows to Linux, as well as having only one password, the Windows password. The real killer feature, though, is centralizing sudo and HBAC rules. The solution provides LDAP for identifying storage and Kerberos for Auth-Z, without the caller even having to reinvent the wheel or create their own schema management interface, etc. If a separate Auth-Z infrastructure is more than the caller is prepared to set up, or emailer in our case, they may want to look at Centricity or likewise open source, which is a freeware that enables Linux hosts to join an Active Directory domain as a full-fledged member. Its interoperability with AD is not required. NIS Yellow Pages domain is the simplest solution to get working if you don't need Active Directory integration. And of course, you could also use WinBind for Active Directory integration and things like that. There are several features out there. This Red Hat Enterprise Identity Manager or Free IPA is probably a good way to go. I know they used to have something called is Fedora Directory Server still a thing, or is it they changed the name to like 389 Server or something like that? Right, Fedora. That's another way to go too.
Oh yeah, it had a really weird name.
Yeah, 389 Directory Server at directory.fedoraproject.org. I don't know if we mentioned this last week too, but this is an LDAP server, and I think there's like schemas you can import to just like make it out of the box ready for user authentication. So yeah, you can check that out too. All right, Alan. Our next email is a little bit of a mini war story. It comes in from Benny. He says, "Hey guys, this is the second time I'm contacting you. I'm a big fan of TechSNAP, Last, Linux Unplugged, and Coder Radio, and I'm sure BSD Now too. I want to blow, and probably Fosho. I want to blow out some steam about IBM and SciByte. They had a service named IBM Smart Cloud. After purchasing a company named SoftLayer, they decided to shut down the service completely with a 2-month notice. They, of course, provide a simple migration tool which will work great on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 or Windows Server 2008. Have another operating system? Well, they support it, and you can easily migrate by rebuilding the server and transferring all of your data. I just feel like this is a terrible way for a company like IBM to do things. Just imagine that Microsoft would do if Microsoft did this with Azure. Thanks for listening and for creating the amazing shows, Benny. Yeah, that sucks. And
migration is hard. Luckily, with Scale Engine, because we're based on this flexibility and stuff, we've specifically adopted the model where we, with our Puppet recipes and our documentation and stuff, we can easily recreate any server. And our solution when something goes hinky is always just repave it from the beginning, because it's just, if you have every little setting and stuff written down so that you can easily recreate the server, you just don't get these problems of legacy systems. Like, I have this older server and it's there's like so much stuff that's been set up on it over the years. And it's like, if I upgrade this and that, it's like, am I going to forget one of the things? And then it's going to break something that's worked for the last 5 years and somebody's going to yell at me.
Right. Oh, yeah, I know that one.
If we have this more rigid, this is what's on the server, and we can easily recreate the server using that same recipe and move the traffic, and it'll just work. And if there's anything that isn't on the recipe, it shouldn't be on the server.
I feel bad for Benny, though, because, like, let's say, for example, they had a big wide deployment of FreeBSD servers, and then they have to move to this new service, and they say, yeah, well, you can use any operating system as long as it's Red Hat Enterprise 6 and Windows Server 2008. And it's just one of these things where that kind of corporate, like, rigid, we can't bend the rules ever. Nothing can ever deviate from the norm. It sort of locks IT guys out from using some of these other operating systems that might be better at the job, like, a FreeBSD server that's a Samba box and an NFS server that's running ZFS on the back end, as opposed to a Red Hat Enterprise server that's using Extended 3 on the back end, right? And now all of a sudden they got to move over their data from a ZFS array to a Extended 3 array.
This is part of the problem with all the clouds. It's like, we've seen how many different cloud providers just randomly shut down with almost no notice, or literally no notice sometimes. Or get acquired and change drastically, right? You're with some nice web agile company, and then they get bought by somebody like IBM, and then it becomes this whole paperwork thing. Like, we had our help desk for Scale Engine before we used Request Tracker RT, the Perl script. We had this service called BTIL, which is based on the ITIL specification of how a help desk should work. And it was this web service, and it worked pretty good, and we paid a little bit a month for it, and it was fine. And then it got bought by Citrix. Mm-hmm. And Citrix is like, well, we can't just take your credit card over the internet anymore. Here's this form you can fax us, and it's going to cost a bunch of extra money, and it's all this. It's just like, they didn't seem to understand the internet as a thing because they're Citrix.
Right.
And then we tried to cancel it, and they're trying to keep billing us anyway, and it was just this horrible corporate experience. And it's just like, so that's why we use our own hosted system now. It's like, we're not going to rely on anything cloud-based because they tend to just
go away.
Yeah, either go away or change or get bought
business
or whatever.
Business decides to pivot, and all of a sudden the thing you relied on isn't in their core business interest anymore. And
exactly. Yeah. Whereas, if you do it yourself, then if it's important for you, then
you got to own that piece.
Do it yourself.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of horrible corporate overlords, let's change gears and have fun with community. Go to Instagram.com/Jupiter Broadcasting if you want to see our new Instagram feed. I mentioned it earlier, and I'm mentioning it now because if you send us in a picture of you wearing your new Jupiter Broadcasting shirt, you'll get featured in our Instagram feed. We're going to take this feed and pull it into something special to make some artwork for the new studio when we move. And there's some good ones in here, Alan. There's some really good ones in here. Like, here's one I think you might appreciate. This gentleman sent it in from his server closet here, and I see in the background the BSD logo. So he's a man after your own heart. And in fact, if I dig through here, Alan, I think I even caught you in here. There's Mr. Jude right there, rocking his Jupiter Broadcasting shirt. And there you are photobombing another guy's picture. That's a good one, Alan. In fact, I photobombed too. TechSNAP makes an appearance twice in this in this arrangement. Yeah, here I am. I'm photobombing in this picture right here, which is awesome. We got some good data center ones sent in. A lot of guys taking their pictures there in the data center where they work. Some good ones here. So many great pictures. Go to Instagram.com/Jupiter Broadcasting if you guys want to see these. You don't even have to be an Instagram member to look at the feed, but you can if you want to be. And if you want to send in your picture, you can. And if you send in a picture of your stickers that you get, I wouldn't be too surprised if you see it show up there.
For sure.
Pretty cool. Something else kind of community related, very community related. The BSD Now show is doing a giveaway of an awesome pillow. Yes,
a handmade pillow of the FreeBSD boot menu. It's awesome. I bought one for myself direct as well, on top of the one we're getting to give away.
Heck yeah.
And it just shipped today, so I was very happy.
So how do I win this here pillow, Alan?
You have to write a tutorial and send it in. And then we will use the tutorial on the show, and we'll pick one to be the winner. So what are you looking for in a tutorial? It can be pretty much anything. Half the stuff we cover in the tutorials isn't really specific to BSD. Like when we did this week's tutorial was about VNstat and iPerf for monitoring your network and testing the performance and stuff.
Those are great tools.
That tool, iPerf you can even run on Windows.
Yeah, oh yeah, you can't you?
Stuff that we're looking at is using CARP, failover, redundant firewalls and stuff. That's BSD specific kind of, but configuring a mail server like Postfix or OpenSMTBD or XIM or whatever, that's really OS agnostic. So, if you want to write a tutorial about that. Nagios monitoring, again, not really BSD specific at all.
Can I send in my Exchange 2013 deployment tutorial?
That one probably wouldn't go over so well. You can send it in. You might not win.
Yeah, okay.
But, anything you'd like to see a tutorial on. And what we'd really love, actually, is if anybody's got some, Linux switcher type tutorials for people coming from
all the things to make the transition.
To use BSD, yeah. But separately, if you won't win the pillow, but if you just have questions or ideas, or if you're interested in maybe switching and you have questions, we'd love to address a lot of those as well.
What they're looking for is all outlined over at bsdnow.tv/contest, and you can read up the deets there and where you send it in.
And see our back catalog. We just recorded episode 21 yesterday, and Chris will probably post that
tomorrow morning,
Friday morning, which is, if you're watching this live, it's soon, and if you're watching this on the download, then
probably already out.
BSD Now is probably already done, or will be very soon.
Yeah. Cool, Al. I love that pillow. It's so awesome that it's handmade.
Yes, I can't wait to. I will show mine off when it comes. Probably a week or two.
Yeah.
I managed to get Colin's slides about that dedupe question.
Yeah.
And so if you can pull up slide number 7.
Stand by, Alan. Pulling up slide number 7.
So this is comparing, if you used a fixed size block for your deduplication, you can see that the original is in black and the new one's in green and the change is in red.
Red, yeah.
If you used a 4-character block, then you would see if you change the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, if you change the word lazy to edit with a 4-byte block, that works fine, right? Because that happens to be lined up with the block boundary. Mm-hmm. However, if you changed it so that your edit was not on the boundary, you see it actually changed 2 blocks, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you actually change the size of the data, right, if you change a 4-letter word to a 3-letter word, then you see from the one below it, it changes every block after the edit, right? And so the solution is a variable size block constructed by splitting the content-dependent points. So Colin, being a mathematician, came up with a way to do this. And now we see that when you change the quick brown fox to just the quick fox, now the change is only 1 block, although that block is 6 characters instead of the usual 4. And you see that each block is a different size, but it's finding that best fit method.
That is cool.
And that's the magic. And then the next slide has the encrypted version of the math, because I can't read that.
Yeah.
And it shows, and then he's got his exponential block size distribution showing what the block sizes actually look like and the probability of the size of the different blocks and so on. And then more math, and then even more math, and then crazy math. And then
this might be one of the geekiest PowerPoints I have ever seen.
Yeah, well,
or OpenDoc, whatever.
You're a BSD con.
Yeah, well, that makes
a lot
sense.
of
That's a good crowd for this.
Yeah. But anyway, it goes on and it kind of gives you an idea of how you might approach it if you were trying to deal with dedupe that way.
Good stuff. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Basically, why you can't just do a fixed size block dedupe
I'll grab
on
it right
everything.
now. All right, I'll put it in the show notes right now. Right on. Okay, sir. Now with that,
I already put it in the show notes.
Well, look at you, Alan. You are so on top of it. It's unbelievable. It's like you got that copy paste thing down like a master. Good job, sir. All right, now with that all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the roundup are stories that just didn't fit the top of the show, but we definitely want to still go over them, give you some links to check out after your own. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, this first one, I was curious. Maybe you might be interested in this brand new service I'm about to start offering. It's called Weblock Security Service, and I'm going to send you a text message anytime you change your domain. Are you interested?
Not quite. So this one, Network Solutions, which was the original domain name registrar before, ICANN came along and it was set up so that there could be other registrars.
Yeah.
So they used to be a monopoly. They appear to be automatically enrolling all of their customers in their new Weblock security service and sending them an email saying, if you don't call us and cancel before February 4th, we will start billing you $1,850 this year and $1,350 every year after that.
What?
For our now Weblock security service.
I think you mean $3, right? You mean $3?
No. $1,350 a year with, for some reason, a big extra bit at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, well, because they got to set it up. So they got to charge more, right? They got to enter that.
So the Weblock program will give you the following. In order to make changes to your domain name's configuration settings, you will need to pre-register as a certified user, whatever that means, but it sounds like you have to set up a new username and password that are somehow different than your old one. All requests for domain name configuration changes must be confirmed by an outbound call we make to a pre-registered authorized phone number you establish. So when you set up your account, you give them your cell phone number, and every time you want to make a change, they will call you, and you will have to provide them a 9-digit PIN number in order to approve the change.
Oh, my gosh.
A message alert will be sent to all certified users notifying the team which certified user has made a change request. So every member of the team will get an email saying, hey, so-and-so tried to change the domain.
I mean, there's trappings of usefulness in this.
In addition, Weblock enrolled customers will have access to 24/7 Network Operations Center and Rapid Response Team in the event of any security issues.
Wow.
So it sounds like this service is really targeted at the big customers that Network Solution was losing when they kept getting hacked.
Yeah, like this is
specifically, like I think it was it Twitter that used them, or maybe not? A couple of fairly big domains got hijacked by the Security and Electronic Army or otherwise.
And they'll pitch this as a high-end security feature.
And if you have a whole team of people, and because you're like Twitter or something, then maybe this is useful where you have them, you have a set of users that have access and you all get notified every time one of the people tries to make a change, so you can make sure that's a legit change and that, it has to be, someone has to call your office and we need to provide this PIN to approve the change and so on, so that somebody like the Syrian Electronic Army can't go hijack your domain.
Mm-hmm.
But they're automatically opting every customer into it.
I love this.
Which I would almost have to think would have to be against some rules from like the Federal Trade Commission or something.
Alan, don't worry. They already have your credit card on file, so it's not a big deal. It's really easy. They'll just add it to the existing payment you have on file.
And rather than saying, hey, here's this new service, opt in, it's you have until February 4th to opt out, and you can only opt out by calling our 1-800 number, where we will probably try to sell it to you anyway or talk you out of canceling.
Right.
And you have to call between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern.
Right. So it's inconvenient.
Then we'll kill you. We'll just charge your credit card. And also, once you establish this, it may take up to 45 days for us to mail you that PIN number. So you probably can't make any changes for those 45 days.
That's the cherry on top right there. That's so great. So if you're a Network Solutions customer, look for this.
Yeah. Q5Sys in the chat room says, I bet they send the 9-digit PIN via email. No, they send it via snail mail in 45 days.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, everybody just enjoy that for a minute. I got something. Yeah. I got something.
So there's a reason why most people don't use Network Solutions. On top of the fact that they cost like $35, and GoDaddy is like $9, and then you can get 30% off by using the code 30DO7.
Network Solutions literally these days feels like they're still stuck back in the early 90s.
Yeah, and the guy who brought this up in particular had his domain since the early 90s and just never bothered to move it.
Yeah, Brett Simmons.
And now he's moved it.
Yeah. All right, well, prepare yourselves. I'm pretty excited. I haven't been able to sleep since this announcement. FreeBSD version 10 is out. Of course, you'll find out all about this on the BSD Now show, but I thought a couple of points of interest jumped out at me. Major enhancements in virtualization, including the addition of Beehive, VirtIO, and native para-virtualization drivers providing support for FreeBSD as a guest and Microsoft Hyper-V. I think that's a huge deal.
Yeah, and also for much improved as a guest in Zen as well.
That's awesome as well. And support.
Also, you can run it virtualized in Zen without doing a custom kernel now. It's built into the generic kernel.
Huge.
So that FreeBSD update works properly. That's what we were talking. Our interview was with Colin Percival, who is the guy that runs the project for using FreeBSD on Amazon EC2.
Yeah.
And that was his work.
Well, so this is what I was going to ask you is, does this mean now we're going to start seeing FreeBSD way more out on services like EC2? And
it's been around on EC2 for a while, although it's even better now with 10.
Okay.
Microsoft Hyper-V, that project started 2 years ago, but it's definitely much better now. Beehive is becoming a big thing now.
And you guys just had a little chat about Beehive 2 episodes
Yes, with the
ago?
developers.
Yeah.
2 episodes ago, we had the developers on. So that was a week and a day ago, we had the 2 developers of Beehive on.
Now, I got a question regarding, so I noticed also one of the features now is support for LZ4 compression for ZFS. Now, on my Linux box, I've had that for a while. So how does that work?
FreeBSD in 9.2's had it for a while as well.
Okay.
It's just the release notes are comparing 10.0 to 9.0, not to 9.2, and that's why there's some.
And got
stuff.
trim support has been added for ZFS on SSDs.
That's been in 9.2 as well.
That's a good one, though. And GCC is no longer installed by default on architectures where Clang is the default compiler.
Yes. So Clang does like i386, AMD64, and a bunch of others. It doesn't do, I don't think, ARM or PowerPC. So it still uses GCC for those.
When does Scale Engine decide, all right, we're going to move up to the next version? Like, how does that?
We have a couple servers that are actually running 11 already because we need the new Beehive features that like we're consuming Beehive features like the day they come out. On our virtualization servers.
Yeah.
We have a couple of 10 servers that were partly just to make sure that 10 works with our production load and to get access to newer features and stuff. Like there's some more ZFS improvements like the NOP write, which means if you have compression on and it compresses a block and realizes that after compression it's the same as what's already written down, it doesn't bother writing it again, which can definitely speed things up, and a bunch of things like that.
Cool.
One of the biggest changes is bind has been removed from the base system, and we now use unbound as a local caching DNS resolver.
Yeah.
The big difference, the big thing there is bind has been responsible for somewhere between like a third and half of our, anyway, between a third and a quarter of every security advisory there's ever been for FreeBSD. Mostly because it was, it's one of the most, it's the biggest thing on the internet, right? It runs the internet.
Yeah.
So it's been the biggest target. So now you can still get it from the ports tree and use it. Just the main difference there is with the ports tree, it's easier to update it because the ports tree is a rolling release, whereas the version of bind that's included in the base system would be fixed for all of 9.0 and all of 10.0 kind of thing. Right? It's kind of like a legacy or a stable version. But also FreeBSD with 10 is going to have a stable version of the ports tree that will only be updated once a quarter,
really?
other than security patches.
Huh.
Yes. So now the ports tree will be 2 different versions. So it'll be the rolling release one that's updated constantly, and one that's like a quarterly stable version that only gets security changes backported.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. It was originally considered too much work, but now it's considered more required, especially in the corporate type environments. So to give you this nice hybrid between like a CentOS model, where it's like a fixed version forever, and the rolling release model.
Well, how about that? That's really cool. All right, so I mentioned this earlier, this bug, this vulnerability in Chrome. Well, here it is. So a developer found a way to trick Chrome into doing some eavesdropping on people in the room. Now, this bug, despite Google finding a way to fix the bug in October 2013, it actually hasn't been pushed out to Chrome yet. So Google knows about this, but it's not fixed yet. And what it does is, and by the way, Google says there's no immediate threat. That's one of the reasons why they haven't pushed it out. They said even when not using your computer, conversations, meetings, and phone calls next to your computer may be recorded and compromised. This is according to the blog post of the developer who discovered this. The bug emerges when malicious sites try to subvert the way Chrome handles speech recognition. Typically, people must manually grant permission to each site that wants to access the computer's microphone to listen in. Once permission has been granted, Chrome lets people know a site is listening via a blinking red dot in the tab. However, the malicious site you visited can continue listening on long after you have left if you activate it with, and by the way, this exploit uses code in a pop-under window that starts the speech recognition system without the user's knowledge, and then once they move on, it continues to record and there's no notification in the tab, even after they've closed the pop-under. So he says...
Well, so if you allow a website to use speech recognition, then it could keep listening. It's like, I don't know that I would do that on a website anyway.
So what this guy is saying is if you use specially crafted code to exploit these permissions particularly with the pop under, there's no notification to the user, but it is listening, even if they don't click grant. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he's saying in his blog post. I look at this and I thought if anything was going to be scary in Chrome, it was going to be this. Have you seen the remote Chrome? There is an extension that allow you to turn Chrome into a remote access system where you can get full access to the screen and all that kind of stuff. You install the extension, you pair it with the Google service, and then Chrome now supports remote logins to your desktop. I thought if anything was ever going to be exploited, that's it. So is it an exploit if he's doing it with a pop under and if the user does have to authorize it? No, but it is breaking system functionality in the sense that the user is no longer being notified that they're being monitored. And I think that's where the key failure is at, is that it sort of shows that the monitoring system sort of is a little half implemented, I suppose. It'd be nice if maybe there was something more, permanent on the Chrome toolbar or something like that that indicated the mic was active or something like that. So, I guess, Google has a fix, but it's worth noting, and all current versions of Chrome are supposedly susceptible to this. So it's kind of a big deal. All right. Target has been... I
guess one question is how many websites are actually set up to do this? And if it's not like some website you're not expecting would be able to just turn this on. You have to approve it first. And when some website asks if it can listen to your microphone, you're like, why? Go away.
Yeah, the bigger deal would be is if there was a way to activate it without the prompt. Then that would really be bad. So Target has been doing a big PR push on the news recently to get public opinion changed around better and more secure credit cards. And I guess the U.S. kind of lags behind on these chips on credit cards. And so Target's making a push for this.
Basically 10 years ago, Target spent $40 million on a 3-year program to try to push to have these chip and PIN cards. So instead of swiping your credit card and then signing the receipt, it's kind of like a debit card, right? You put the card in with the chip. It stays in the machine the whole time during the transaction, and you have to type in a PIN number to approve the transaction.
Yeah.
So that means if someone steals your credit card and they don't have your PIN number, then they can't charge things on it, right? And it's just better generally. Even the debit cards work that way now here in Canada. So both the debit cards and credit cards have a chip, and you type in a PIN number. And in Europe, they've been a thing for quite a long time. And in Canada, they became really popular a couple of years ago when all the banks reissued all their debit cards and credit cards with the chips. I think I have one card left that doesn't have a chip. Actually, no, that has been replaced. So I don't have any cards left that don't have a chip. And so, Target's pushing for that now because with that system, it would have been a lot harder to cause all this problem.
Yeah, they've been working with CBS News to do a spotlight on it. All right, this one struck me.
It just seems like a kind of obvious thing. It's like everybody else in the world has this. Why did they not do that?
Yeah, I guess
the cards still have a magnetic stripe, and they still work. If the store doesn't have the updated machine, you can still use the credit card the old-fashioned way, right? And the credit card still works online the old-fashioned way. Although that can be extended with things like verified by Visa or whatever MasterCard's version of that is called.
They call it like that too.
Yeah. And so, there's these optional security systems, and they're just not used very many places yet. Like I noticed, Amazon doesn't bother with verified by Visa, although Amazon's all about the low resistance.
Yeah, right? And every time I've had to use it on Newegg, it has been so frustrating. It has not worked for me. Something happened. I don't know what the problem is. I can't even tell you what the problem
is. Mine's worked the 3 times I've used it, but I've never used it much. The scarier part was that it had the same same restriction where my password couldn't be more than 12 characters. And my bank's like, at least they enforced it can't be the same password as your online banking password. But they were comparing it to my online banking password, which suggests that it's not hashed.
Oh,
well, I guess they could still compare it if it was hashed, but still, it just seems like
you wonder.
At least they wouldn't let me use the same password. But.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how they're checking that. This one, one
it's
out.
Because the way Verified by Visa works is it actually sends you back to your bank's website.
Yeah.
Right? So it's your bank, rather than Verified by Visa having to know your password.
So IBM is getting out of the x86 server game, and they're in final talks to sell to Lenovo, who we all remember bought their laptop line. Now, the reports were that IBM's been shopping this around for a while, including specifically talks with Dell. But it looks like they've reached an agreement for Lenovo to buy the server division at a price of $2.3 billion. What's interesting about this is, according to IDC figures, IBM had reigned the top market share and position of servers overall last year, and IBM's x80 server sales made up about 3/4 of IBM's overall server business, though not necessarily server profits. And I used to deploy an S-ton of these IBM x86 servers, and they were some of the best in the business. I love these IBM servers. It's interesting to see IBM slowly pull out of anything that's even a little consumery. And, they're still focusing on their Z series and all of that, and Watson and all that good stuff, but goodbye, IBM.
In general, I've only ever used one IBM server. It's actually still in my basement. It was part of resolving a problem with IBM where a U.S. customer tried to buy a license from my friend's computer store, and they sold him a license that somehow only worked in Canada. And because it was a license, they wouldn't refund it, and there was this whole thing. And they're like, the best we could do is have a free low-end IBM server.
Wow. Well, you know what I'd like them to do with those server sales is buy back the ThinkPads and do something right with them. I'm just kidding.
You're not liking the ThinkPads?
Oh, no.
I'm loving my T530.
There are some that are good. There are definitely. There's about three of the ThinkPads I like a lot.
Which ThinkPads don't you like?
The thick ones. I can't remember. I don't know IBM
like
model
the T530.
numbers.
Yeah, I have the T530 with the 17-inch, weighs like a ton.
And the other thing I don't like, so I shouldn't really get into all this right now. But the other thing, all right, I won't get into it right now. But the one thing I definitely don't like is their website. I'll just put it like that. I hate that. I was on there just the other day configuring to do some price comparison stuff, and it is absolutely frustrating to use. But that's an unrelated rant. I actually used to consider ThinkPads some of like the best laptops ever made, and now I think they have several models that are still very good. Like the ones they brought over from IBM are still really good products. That's my opinion. Now, did you see, we love covering these on the show because both of you and I have a ton of storage. Backblaze put out another sort of evaluation of hard drive reliability and life cycle and things like that. And they compared Hitachi drives, Western Digital drives, and Seagate drives and charted how they ran and the different sizes and how they performed.
Right. Well, part of the numbers are basically just every failure they've seen documented.
Yep.
So it doesn't always reflect everything because they've had some of the
longer.
They've had the Seagate drives for longer.
Yeah.
And things like that.
That's the gotcha.
Yeah. So, you can only get so much information from the numbers. But in general, they found the Hitachi drives were lasting a lot longer. Now, part of that might, they don't really talk about the cost much, but those Hitachi drives are a little more server-oriented, whereas the Seagate ones are, generally the ones they were buying were the desktop-oriented ones. But the interesting thing they found is that the 1.5 terabyte, the specific model number, the ST3 1500 341AS, had a very high failure rate, and I've experienced the same thing. The ones I had, every one of them is now dead. Most of they lasted a couple of years, most of them, but eventually every one of them died.
They're all the 1.5 terabyte?
Yeah.
Yep.
All the 1.5. So I had 4 of them that I thought were working. And I pulled them off the shelf where they've been sitting and pulled them in, and every single one of them was failed. And I was like, what? But that was the 1500s. Now, the ST3000 DM001, I have must be 60 of those now, and I haven't had any failures yet. Although Backblaze says they're averaging 1.4 years. or the ones of the 4,252 they have, they average 1.4 years old. Now, they talk about the annual failure rate, but they don't break it down. Like in the previous study, remember, they were just looking at the life of a drive, and they found that if it didn't die in the first 30 days, it was probably good for 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, in these stats, they're just doing the raw failure rate and not incorporating that information. Now, if they broke it down by, the percent chance of the failure of this drive based on 30 days, 1 year, and 2 years or something, it might be more illuminating.
It's still interesting how their experience in some ways on a macro scale mirrors my and your experiences with some of those drives. Remember when I had a bunch of drives fail on me. Those were the 3 terabyte units that they show had a 9-something% failure rate too.
Now I have the part of the thing is that with those Seagate ones, the ST3000 DM001, they've changed the way their model numbers work, so it doesn't include the place of manufacture anymore. With the old ones, there was the 341 and the 541 that indicated they were made in a different place, I think. Anyway, there are more than one plant for those Seagates, and one plant seems to do better than the other. Although because it's just the same model number, you can't, when you're ordering online or something, you can't pick out just the ones that are better. And I forget which one's better.
We also have linked, Lifehacker did a write-up of the same post, kind of more of a summary, pulled out more of the graphs. It's a little bit shorter version, which we also have linked in the show notes for the roundup section.
Yeah, but in general, they talk about also that Western Digital bought Hitachi, and so they don't know that the Hitachi drives will remain as good. But in general, they have about the same number of Seagate and Hitachi drives, almost 13,000 each, and they only have about 3,000 Western Digital drives, 58 Toshiba drives, and 18 Samsung drives.
I don't have a lot of Samsung.
The Samsung drives are all averaging 3.7 years old, so I'm guessing they're mostly leftovers from the very beginning.
Gosh, that makes me feel so lucky for some of the drives I have that have been running pretty much 24/7 and are much older than 3 years.
Yeah, my oldest drives in production are probably the 2 terabyte SAS drives from Seagate, and they've been running since December 2011 without issue.
Nice,
and under heavy load. And the OS on that is on a pair of Barracuda XTs, which have been fine as well. So we'll have to see.
This hacker says he could access 70,000 healthcare.gov records in 4 minutes. That's a pretty good record. I got to say, that's a lot of records. That's a high density.
Yeah. So this one is some security researchers that were testifying before Congress, including Kevin Mitnick and other people. And they were talking about how bad the security was. I think they have a quote here from Kevin Mitnick, who says, it would be a hacker's wet dream to break into healthcare.gov. A breach may result in massive identity theft never seen before. These databases house information on every single U.S. citizen. It's shameful that the team that built healthcare.gov site implemented minimal, if any, security best practices.
Ouch.
In particular, the guy that they're talking about at the beginning there, David Kennedy, who's the CEO of TrustSec, says they reported 17 vulnerabilities, and so far one of them has been half fixed. And he said other security researchers have identified 20 plus other exposures on the site.
I tell you what, that's not giving me confidence. How is it?
Nope.
What kind of? So I don't even understand, because what does this site even have? Because I guess for some states it doesn't forward you to your own local exchange. Like maybe I don't know.
Right.
Complicated.
But it seems to be tied into some government database of everything.
Well, good. Well, good. The next one.
And yeah, cheapest contractor. That's the best way to build a giant web app for healthcare.
What's worse is when it's not even the cheapest. It's like, cronyism at its best.
Overpaid cronyism.
So this one's just a fun read-up. We'll leave the exercise to the viewer at home, but this guy put up a story about how his VPS got hacked to mine Bitcoins, and then he also, what I love about it, just talks about how he finally went through and, okay, well, I'm going to wipe it, do a fresh install of CentOS, and wait a minute, I'm infected again? Good write-up on his blog post over here called, he titled it, Kids, this is a story of how I met my hacked VPS.
Yeah, so he says he got hacked a while ago. So what he did was install a newer version of CentOS, not relying on an older one, update all his packages, disable root login via SSH, disable passwords via SSH, set up the firewall to block everything except for 80, 443, and 22, set up fail to ban, change the root password to be really long, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But then his site got hacked, but it's because they were compromising his web app. They were somehow able to write to his the document root of his web app, probably by exploiting the web app, and installed pwn.jsp, and then that would allow them to do remote code execution. So they would run wget, download a Perl script, run it via Perl. It would listen on a port. They would be able to connect in and have a shell as the web user, as the whatever user his Java thing was running as, and then they could do whatever they want. And they took over the server and installed a Bitcoin miner. I used to see this a lot with Perl and PHP scripts. Like people install like hilariously bad photo gallery PHP scripts written by like some 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And then there'd be IRC bots running out of /TMP on the web server, written in Perl and PHP and stuff. And or people trying to get PHP shells and stuff. And I had to constantly lock stuff down and yell at people to install a better photo gallery.
Yeah. Too funny. Alan, this next story, if it's true, it would represent almost a fifth of the German population being at risk. It almost seems too big to believe, but millions of passwords and email details have been stolen in Germany. 16 million email users. 16 million users, if the story's true. This is according to the Federal Office for Security. The criminals had infected computers with software which allowed them to gather email addresses and account passwords.
So it sounds like they installed had a keylogger virus of some kind.
Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's pretty short on details so far, but it's developing now. The agency has not yet commented on what progress has been made in tracking down the hackers either. But if you guys see any, this kind of thing, sometimes it's hard for us to track in the U.S., so if you see something develop with this story, please do submit it to links.techsnap.tv. That's our subreddit, links.techsnap.tv. And I'll watch that for the roundup for next week so we can continue our coverage there. Okay, Alan, now this next. Oh, yes. Did you see that? Did you get this one in the email, this video? This is a great video.
Yes, but there's another link first. There's a Twitter link first.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that one. Okay, yeah, okay. I see it. I do see it now.
Yeah. So when I used to have to teach this, we didn't have a diagram nearly this nice, and this one is so much better.
DNS queries deconstructed. It's an awesome infograph.
Yeah, so this infograph basically explains how the internet turns a web address like www.example.com into the IP address you actually have to connect to. And yes. So step one is you type in the URL, and your computer asks whatever our DNS server you're configured to use, which is typically either the router at your house, which then forwards to your ISP, or your ISP, or maybe you have Google DNS or OpenDNS. So you ask, hey, where is example.com? So the first thing that server does is check if it already knows the answer, right? If it's cached that answer. If it has, it sends it back to you. If not, it has to start at the beginning. So what it'll do is go and ask the root name server, which is the name server for the domain dot. And right, and that server will say, hey, over here you can get the top level domain server. So the servers that run .com or .org or whatever the domain is, right? So that goes back to your server, and it uses that information, then go ask the .com server. And it's like, hey, .com, do you know about example.com? And it'll send back the answer of, hey, example.com's name server is over here. Then that recursive name server can then go ask the authoritative name server for that domain. In the example here, it's DNS Made Easy, the service I use for DNS. And they'll be like, oh, yes, the website address is this IP address, and it sends it back to you. And then finally, once you have the IP address, then you can go to the website. And that's why caching is so important, because otherwise you have to go through all these steps, and each one takes, 50 milliseconds or more sometimes. And so by skipping all of that, you can have much faster.
I noticed, when I put in my pfSense firewall and turned on its built-in DNS server, there's a very perceptible load time difference in my web pages now, where it just things pop a little bit faster. Whenever I'm over at somebody's house and I see that resolving down in the browser status bar, I'm always like, oh come on, Why am I waiting for this? So, that is a great, and this is made from DNS Made Easy.
Yes, they're just helpfully explaining how that system works.
Now we have a video in the roundup, the story of the first ultra modern phone cable.
Well,
it was kind of like last week we talked about.
Yes, so last week we had the little diagram that didn't really explain much.
Yeah.
This one's actually a documentary about the first ship that laid fiber optic cable. So it was ultra modern at the time. Now, not so much.
This is
as you can tell from
awesome. Jeez. Come along, children.
November 1963. Once again, the Bell Systems ocean cable layer CS Long Lines moves up Chesapeake Bay toward Baltimore. She is returning with pride after her first big job, a third transatlantic telephone cable. This latest voice route to Europe extends 3,500 miles along the ocean floor, from the beaches of New Jersey to the coast of Cornwall on the southwestern tip of England.
I think I want to grab this for sound clips. This is awesome. This is perfect. We had this emailed into us too, and so I forgot the person's name who sent this in, but I'm gonna watch this later tonight. That's great. Save that to my Plex box. We'll have a link to that, and I'll drop a link in the chat room too if you guys want to. Oh, you already got it. Okay. Fine, chat room. Fine. Be like that, chat room. Okay, Alan, well, that just leaves us with one last
story.
Yes, sir, and that is from EasyDNS. Domains locked and London police takedown ordered to be transferred. So this is a follow-up to a story?
Yes, that we've covered over a couple of different episodes.
Yeah.
But I remember the London City Police issued this takedown notice for a couple of domains.
Right.
With absolutely no legal standing to do so.
Yeah.
And the domain registrar that had the domains locked them and wouldn't let the user have access to them. And the user requested to transfer them to EasyDNS so that they would have control of the domain still. And the registrar that was losing the domains wouldn't release them because they decided they didn't need to. And EasyDNS tried to force them to and went through VeriSign, the guys that run the .com registry. And they issued the decision of no decision. But eventually it got escalated and they won. And so the domains are going to be transferred now.
Good.
The panel that made the decision from the, what was it called? The National Arbitration Forum said, to permit a registrar of record to withhold the transfer of a domain based on the suspicion of a law enforcement agency without the intervention of a judicial body opens the possibility for abuse by agencies far less reputable than the City of London Police.
Preach it.
Presumably, the provision in the transfer policy requiring court order is based on the reasonable assumption that the intervention of a court and judicial decree ensures that the restriction of the transfer of domain name has some basis of due process associated with it, etc. So they're saying that they cannot prevent these domains from moving on unless they have a court order locking the domain in place.
That's a good outcome. That's as good as I suppose we could hope. Good stuff. Okay, Alan, anything else we want to cover?
They said the update was that ironically they've just received a letter, EasyDNS says, from the board of pharmacies saying exactly why they have to take down a domain no matter what, without a court order.
They just keep on trying.
Yeah. So if they hadn't fought this battle, they would be up against it a second time anyway.
Good for them. That was foresight on their part. So hats off to them. Okay. Anything else we want to cover?
No, that's about it.
All right, well, then I'll just remind folks that you can watch us live and hang out in our chat room and help us title these shows and shoot the, shoot the crap with us between segments? Yeah. I don't know a nice way to say that, but that's essentially what we do.
Talk shop. That's the whole reason we started the show, right? Because you and I like to talk shop about stuff.
And now people can join us live and talk shop with us over at jblive.tv. We're live at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is?
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
I knew it was going to come. I was waiting for it. And, of course, you can also listen to the audio stream at jblive.info or just download TechSNAP when it comes out later on over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. And you can subscribe to the RSS feed and just get us automatically. We're also in iTunes and Stitcher and lots of other podcast places if you use those apps. Just grab the RSS feed and then boom, you don't have to worry about it. You just get the TechSNAP show. All right, Alan, well, have yourself a great week. And I want to say a special thank you, everyone, for tuning in this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. We'll see you right back here next week.